Hey guys, Vincent back with another video for Tails Coffee, and today I'm going to be addressing some of the most frequently asked questions in the comments for YouTube and on my Instagram posts. So before we get into the video, my name is Vince. I roast coffee for Tails Coffee. We're based out of Vancouver. If you want to see my favorite equipment, my favorite beans, check out my website, tailscoffee.com. And if you love weekly coffee content, make sure to hit the subscribe button and leave a comment if you have any questions, okay? So leading off the Q&A, I have a question from Braxton Jens. He asked, tell us about Tails Coffee Shop. How do you guys operate? You roast there, or is there a roasting facility somewhere else? Tell us more. Tails Coffee was actually founded in my coffee shop, Brew Cafe, and I actually found it with two of my customers, Eric and Jackie. We literally were just like one day, I think it was like sometime during the pandemic, we were like, hey, let's roast coffee and let's make it fun. Eric does all the operations. Jackie's the guy behind the camera. He's the one who has to deal with my overly blown mic and my terrible acting skills. But for the coffee, Tails Coffee was created with the idea or with the intent that we look to create coffees that are more relatable for people. I think right now with specialty coffee, when there's like all these regions and all these processing methods, it can get a lot more confusing than it should be, especially for people that want to start out. All these brewing process, water temperature scales, like I think a lot of things are overly complicated, and I wanted to make coffee more fun and relatable for those that wanted to start out. And so if you guys didn't know, on my coffee bags, I actually don't even include the flavor profiles, and I've actually recently just removed all the regions because I think it's a little bit more irrelevant. Instead, what we try to do is we try to create or roast coffees, and then we try to name them in a way that it gives off a certain vibe or feeling that we think is similar to the taste. For example, we're about to launch a new coffee called Early Bird, and Early Bird is supposed to be a coffee that's really rich, really heavy, has a little bit of acidity, but it's supposed to kind of like slap you in the face and wake you up, because that's the feeling you're gonna get, and this is a taste that I would enjoy when I wake up right after morning. So you can make it French press, pour over, whatever it is, and it's just a feeling or vibe that we want to connect with the people. As for my roaster, I roast on a San Franciscan, the SF6, so that's a 3 kilogram roaster or 6.6 pound roaster. I do micro batches. I think that the flavors are probably best with a smaller roaster just because of the way the flame tips work. I really enjoy this roaster. It's pretty fun to roast on it. I guess I'll take some pictures and put them up on Instagram, so make sure to follow me there too, okay? So the next question we have is from Daniel C. He asked, what's your evolution into drinking good coffee? Did you ever have a cup of coffee that changed your perception of what coffee should taste like? And as a personal question, he asked me what my favorite nail polish color is. So thank you for your support. So I actually started off coffee like most people. It was like diner coffees and Starbucks. It was pretty bad. It was super bitter. But it kind of like washed the grease away, so we still consumed it anyways. From there, I kind of moved on into like the sweeter coffees. That was like the Tim Hortons Double Double or the McDonald's McCafes, 2 creams, 2 sugars kind of a thing. It wasn't actually until maybe like, I guess like 10 or 12 years ago now, I moved to Hong Kong to work a little bit there. Worked for about a year there, and I hit up a lot of coffee shops because the coffee scene culture was quite different from what I'm used to in Vancouver. Vancouver was literally just littered with Tim Hortons and Starbucks. But in Hong Kong, there was a lot of independent cafes, and there was a lot more personalized service, a lot more sit-down cafes, and the coffees were brewed with a lot more care. And I still to this day think that the coffee scene in Vancouver isn't quite that great. I mean, we're getting better, but it still hasn't hit what was 12 years ago in Hong Kong. Now, when I was there, I actually had a run-up World Champions coffee, and it was quite expensive, but it was really amazing. I remember drinking it as an espresso shot. It tasted so bad. I felt like I threw up in my mouth. Then he did a long shot for me with a bit of water, so like a very tight ratio. It was like maybe like 3 or 4 ounces of coffee, and it was super sweet, super juicy. It was literally just espresso with a bit of water, and it was super tasty. And then when he made it into a latte, I kid you not, no sugar added. This tasted like a strawberry milk. So it was like a hot strawberry milkshake. It was just amazing. It was so good. And so coming back to Vancouver, I didn't really enjoy the coffees seen here, didn't really find anything. I mean, all of our cups here, smallest size back then was like 12 ounces. Macchiatos, cappuccinos, lattes, they literally the same size. So I kind of stayed away from coffee for a little bit. And then once I was kind of done with my financial sector, I moved into coffee and I decided to start brewing coffee manually. And at the time, like, you know, coffees were starting to be, the coffee scene in Vancouver was starting to get better. We had like Revolver, Nemesis, like timber trains, and they were like manually brewing coffees. And I thought that was kind of interesting, and I thought I could take it up a step further, learn a bit more, and here I am now just drinking the coffees that's in my city. As for my favorite nail polish, I'm not sure if you guys remember, but I once had like a chrome heart, black kind of like silver look. That was probably my favorite one I've ever had done. That was done by a friend of mine, Jessica. She's one of my customers.
Since this is a Q&A, I have to answer the most popular question that we got. Why is our coffee so damn good? Now, let me tell you why our coffee is so damn good, you know. Like, at Tails, you know, we always wanted to tell a story. And this is a story about a good feeling. And that feeling is seeing your crush text you back, all right? Tails is the coffee that will text you back. That's why our coffee is so good. And just because it's so good, I need to give you guys a discount code, all right? If you go to tailscoffee.com, that's tailscoffee.com, and put in the discount code Candice, that's CANDICE, you'll get 15% off your next purchase, all right? That's Candice at tailscoffee.com. We're the coffee company that texts you back.
So we have our third question, and it's from, I'm sorry if I say this name wrong, but it's Matthias Chicana. I hope I got it right. He said, I live for those shouts, keep them loud. What are your thoughts on the 4 to 6 method for the V60? I used to brew the single 200 gram cup with James Hoffman's technique, but the 4 to 6 method brought more depth and complexity to my brews. Then I tried the single pour technique, couldn't get the sweetness and complexity that I like from the 4 to 6. So I'm sorry you can't get the same kind of complexity from the single pour as you can from the 4 to 6 method. So the 4 to 6 method is by Katsuya. It's actually really interesting. Haruo did a whole video on it on the YouTube, and I actually watched it before I started my coffee shop as well. It is quite a good method. I actually used it in my shop during the first year, I'd like to say. I thought the method was quite good, but you use coarser grinds and you pour multiple times. And so the complexity might actually be because you enjoy the lighter texture or the lighter flavors. That's because the bigger chunks in the 4-6 method don't get extracted quite as quickly. You're gonna get a lot more of the darker flavors from the ultra fines that come out with it, and that's where the complexity might be building up for you. Maybe we can work something out to help you figure out your single pour technique. The reason I do the single pour technique is because I just think like grind sizes should be more even. But like I said, the 4-6 method is something I actually use myself. I quite enjoyed it. I actually had the liberty to speak with him before, and he actually pours differently for each part of the 4 to 6 method. It's just when we look at a recipe, we don't necessarily see or hear what people think. And when they pour, they could be pouring harder because it's sinking, or it's becoming more muddy, or to prevent clogging. And so keep that in mind, that you can have, I guess, a little bit more room for error in multiple pours, just because you have a little bit more time to work with. Single pour could be a little bit more difficult in that sense, but if you work on pouring a little bit slower, you might be able to get a really nice, rich coffee and nice sweetness to it. So next we have a question from George Gonzalez. Now, George asks, how do you fine tune your single pour method on the origami? Do you make any adjustments to your pour rate based on grind size, amount of coffee brewed, or type of roast? And secondly, he wanted to know, what are my thoughts on cold brew, and do you have any ideas on how to improve it? So let's start with the first part of your question. How do I fine tune my single pour? Now, for me, I actually only use one grind size for everything. In fact, I actually even use this grind size on my Breville espresso machine, which is kind of interesting. I'll go into that in a sec, but I think that when you're doing pour overs or manual brews, we always talk about even extraction and how even extraction is probably the best way to kind of look at things. And if your grind sizes are not the same size, or you have a high distribution, then you're not going to be able to extract as evenly. So that's why I actually grind on a medium fine side. And so I found like a grind size that I love working with, and I actually just stick to that one. So I don't ever change my grind size. Now, I definitely changed the way I pour based on the type of beans, my batch size, and how the beans were roasted, obviously. So for darker beans, because there's more gases, you actually have to pour a lot slower to make sure you're pressing down all the grinds and making sure all the bubbles and gases are not getting in the way of the water. So you always pour slowly from the beginning until everything is just pressed down, and then you can speed yourself up. As for temperature, I also do that if there's a lot of gases, if there's less gases. Less gases means you can have a much higher water temperature, and if there's more gases, I recommend using a lower water temperature, and that would generally be for darker coffees. As for wash process, I don't really think that really makes a huge difference. It's really just understanding what your beans are trying to tell you and how you make the adjustments for it. It's all to do with the pouring, in my opinion. So as for my thoughts on cold brew, I actually don't serve cold brew in my store. I rather brew a pour over and then have it iced instead. I think that the act of brewing cold brew is actually very simple, and it would be a waste of money for people to spend on a shop that's just pouring out of a tap or something like that. So I don't actually personally do cold brews, and I don't think it's necessary here. But you know what? I think Eric has his own opinions on it. So let's ask Eric what he thinks about cold brews.
I don't think about cold brew.
As for how I would improve the cold brew, I would actually start with hot water. So I always do hot water first on my cold brews. I give it a quick stir, and then I just use just enough hot water to cover up all the grinds, make it wet, make it moist, give it a quick stir, and then I fill it to the top with cold water before putting it in the fridge. So that's my little tip to you. Use hot water first. So the next question actually comes from Jorge. I know this Jorge. Hi, Jorge. He's from Vancouver as well, okay? So he said, hey guys, great videos. I always had a doubt with Vincent's method. Huh? Why you pour so slowly at the beginning and make only one pour if you finally need to stir so vigorously the bed? Isn't it more practical to increase the agitation in the pour and stir less at the final? It's a good question, Jorge. Pouring slow is actually really, really, really important. It's because you want, like, a good cup of coffee doesn't just taste good. I think a good cup of coffee has to be brewed well from the beginning. And that means from the first drip. If you pour really quickly, your first drip's gonna come out really quickly, and it's gonna be really thin. It's gonna be like watery, and it's not gonna be taste to it. Why would I be drinking that? And that's why I don't like flat bottoms as much. So anyways, that's not part of the question. But I think if you pour slowly, you can have a longer first drip. Sometimes I can even make it as long as 18 to 20 seconds before my first drip comes out. And at that point in time, I know for a fact that that first drip has absorbed a lot of flavor. And that's how you know your concentration of the coffee is gonna be very, very strong or high in the beginning. And you want it to be high because you don't want any of the thinness or under extraction to happen, especially in the beginning. So you always start slow. Once the bed is completely moistened and you've pushed all the grinds down, then you can start to speed up because there's nothing else for you to really achieve with the pour. Now, when I pour, I don't really show this, nor do I really talk about this. I actually lift a little bit on the top side, and then I pull it back down on the bottom side. And that's because you want it to be gentle, and you want to lift and have it a quick motion, so you actually force the coffee into a spiral, and then I just pour down the side at the end. So that's how I actually achieve that. Now, as for the stir at the end, we always want an even extraction at the end of it before everything starts sinking. You give it a quick stir to keep all the grinds suspended, because in my opinion, once the coffee grinds have sank and settled on the bottom, there's not a lot of flavor being released, and you might as well just be doing a bypass. Like, if you guys are pouring multiple times, 3 to 4 times, just try pouring twice, and then the rest in the 3 or 4 times, I guess pour 3 times, and then the 4th part just add as a bypass. It would probably taste better than you actually pouring 4 times through the bed. And that's just how I do it. I want to make sure everything that's good has been fully extracted before it sinks, and that's how I brew my coffees. So the next question we have is from Ado Lad. I hope I didn't murder your name, okay? And this guy asked me, he said, opinion on different processes, washed, natural? For your pour over when I brew, do I see the process? How does it influence my expectations of the cup? So over the years, I've actually drank quite a few coffees myself. I've tasted coffees from different roasters around the world, and I've actually had a couple of brewers from even other countries come in, bring their own water, bring their own equipment, just to show me their techniques, just because I have some friends in Asia as well. And honestly, at this point in time, I've tasted Brazilian coffees that most people think it would taste like a Panama geisha. It's just insane how like a roaster or a brewing technique can change the flavor profile. So for me, I actually think a lot of processing, everything, even regions, don't really matter that much. If you disagree with me, leave in the comments below. But as interesting as this is, I actually don't think we should be looking at places or we shouldn't be judging a bean based on where it's from and how it's processed. Every roaster kind of imagines it differently. Every brewer kind of brews it differently. I mean, there are certain flavor profiles that are kind of like more, I guess like known for like certain regions, but it's not always necessarily true, especially with like all these new processes coming out like anaerobic or like double washed or like, I don't know, honeys. There's so many different things that we can be doing with coffees that we haven't explored. And I don't think we should be judging them based on where they came from. So I don't actually do that. I don't even look at flavor notes. I either just enjoy it or I don't. I go to coffee shops, I drink, and when I look at their menu, it doesn't mean anything. I just assume that every coffee is gonna be good. And if I don't really hate on the place. I respect them for what they do, right? It's not a coffee for me. Maybe they roast it super light, maybe they like those greener flavors. It's just not a place that I think is suitable for me. But I really respect every roaster because I think every roaster, every brewer is like an artist. So at least anyone in the coffee industry that really cares about their craft, I think we're artists, and it's just a matter of how much I appreciate their art. I can go and look at paintings and just don't like them, but other people do. So I don't think we should be judging them based on the process or the thing. It doesn't really matter so much. Even for me as a roaster, when I buy the bean, I do have certain expectancies. Like if I'm looking for floral flavors, I'm gonna go to certain regions, but it really doesn't matter. Those flavors can show up anywhere else. So thanks for watching the video. Thanks for all the support you guys have been giving us and all the questions that you guys have left for us. I hope this video has answered some of the questions and it helps you improve your brewing based on how I think about, coffee and how I like to brew my coffees. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe, leave a like if you liked this, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye.